Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the 14th episode of the YALLA show. Inshallah, we'll continue once all the other guests join, inshallah. Let's just wait for people to come on, inshallah. Are you going out again? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother.
Seems down like 2. Okay. So how are you doing? How's the US?
Well, it depends on where you are in the US, but alhamdulillah, I'm in Minnesota, which is the protest started and where George Floyd was killed. But alhamdulillah, we're doing okay in Minnesota. There's some chaos at night, but beyond that, things are getting better.
But George Floyd, he was killed in Minnesota?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was killed in South Minneapolis, which is a predominantly African-American neighborhood.
I don't know, man. So, how often does this happen in the States, basically, the assault of the African Americans? And
so I don't know, Imran, how much you know about Minnesota or African Americans in the U.S., but in Minnesota there's a sizable population of African Americans. Many have been here for, since really the founding of Minnesota, but also a lot of recent, within the last 60 or 70 years, African Americans have come up from Chicago, from Detroit, who call Minnesota home now. And so the neighborhood where George Floyd was killed is a predominantly African American neighborhood, 30th in Chicago, in South Minneapolis. And shootings like this occur fairly often, actually, in Minneapolis. In 2015, an African American man named Jamar Clark was shot and killed by Minneapolis police in North Minneapolis. Philando Castile was killed in St. Paul, Minnesota. Not long after that, a man by the name of Thurman Blevins. And so the list is actually fairly extensive. So it's a fairly common occurrence. Not to mention that the disparities between economic, educational, employment disparities between African Americans and other minorities and white people in the state of Minnesota are fairly high as well.
How's the black population in Minnesota dealing with this issue?
So, alhamdulillah, many of them have taken to the streets in peaceful protest to demand that change occurs. And so for them, initially on the first day of the protest, what they were calling for was the immediate arrest and the charging of the man that killed, really all 4 of the men that worked to kill George Floyd. And so Officer Derek Chauvin, who was the first one who arrived on the scene, had his knee on the neck of the man, was charged yesterday, but not with first-degree murder. He was charged with third-degree murder, which is a lighter charge, and manslaughter, both of which really don't amount to what could be called technically a conviction, or even and it will unlikely lead to a conviction. Also, in the state of Minnesota, not one police officer has ever been convicted of killing an unarmed civilian. So usually what happens is it goes to trial, it goes to grand jury, and they get off scotch-free. And so what the people are now calling for is the immediate charging and arrest of really all 4 police officers and a first-degree conviction, in addition to defunding the Minneapolis police, and those who are also calling for, right, except Mohammed Nur, who I believe was charged. I'm not sure. I was out of the country when the Mohammed Nur incident happened. He might have been the first, I think, if anything. Right.
There was a case of another brother. I don't like. I only see this stuff on social media. I think his name was Ahmed, a Muslim brother. Same, I think, in the States, and I think he was killed by the cops or something.
I think you might be talking about Amadou Diallo, who was killed in New York City in the 90s by really a barrage of police bullets. I think they shot him 41 times. And so, to the point, currently what people in Minneapolis are calling for is the immediate defunding of the police, more or less the abolition of the police state. The way the government here has responded is that they've sent in the National Guard. Today, the president is sending in military police to patrol and kind of control the streets. However, this has only led to more tension with the police as they continue to. Oh, Ahmaud Arbery, right, who was killed in Atlanta, Georgia recently. But the situation here now is that the police is militarizing. They are seeking to quote unquote de-escalate, even as white supremacist militias are coming into Minnesota from Wisconsin, Iowa, Montana, and are setting fire to minority-owned businesses. And so the police are doing little to stop this, seeing as they've pulled out of these neighborhoods entirely.
So, Akhi, this whole issue of racial discrimination, cops killing people. There's discrimination basically not only against the African Americans, but even other minorities. And most times the majority, let's say in the states, the majority are the whites basically, and most times like even the cops who do these things, this is not the first time, this is not the second time, they get away with all this stuff, and people call for adl, they're calling for justice, and they want justice for this brother, justice for that brother. Now let's talk from an Islamic perspective. What does Islam say about this issue of racial discrimination and liking one person due to their color or their tribe or something like that?
So a foundational part of the message of the Prophet ﷺ is the fundamental equality of all people, and this is established in the Quran and the Sunnah. Beyond that, this has material realities. So the Prophet ﷺ tells us, "Inna Allah la yanzuru ila ajsamikum wa suwarikum walakin yanzuru ila qulubikum wa a'malikum." Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at your bodies, at your physical form. Rather, He looks at your hearts and your minds. Now, even though this is the case, throughout the history of Islam, throughout the history of civilized peoples, there have been demarcations based on race, gender, ethnicity, level of wealth and status. And so we have to, as Muslims, work to ensure that we are living to the best of our abilities to uphold the qawa'id of Islam. And so recently what I saw this week on social media, there was a young Somali brother from the UK, from Canada, who had an Instagram live that went pretty viral, where he was stating that the water that he mixed wudu with, right, or the act.
He was doing what?
He was on Instagram Live, a Somali brother from the UK. And so there's a contingent, I think, of Somali Americans, Somali Canadians in the UK, other, East Africans and some West Africans who don't really sympathize or don't really see themselves as African American, don't see themselves in the same light as African Americans. And I know that for a fact. I know many Nigerians, many Ghanaians in the state of Minnesota who also, will use derogatory terms like Akata when they're talking about African Americans, who will not see themselves as African Americans in the same sense. They'll claim their African identity. They say, I'm Ghanaian, I'm Fulani, I'm Somali, I'm Ethiopian, I'm Oromo, but I don't identify as African American. So the brother was on Instagram Live And there's a very vocal contingent of these people on, social media, on Facebook, Twitter. He said very clearly, he said, the water that I make wudu with, or the act of nawafil salah, are more beneficial or more meaningful than the life of the man. And so this is a sentiment around the internet, and was really echoed by a surprising amount of Muslim youth. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, if a person endeavors to save one life, it is the equivalent of if they have saved all of mankind. And if the person takes a life without due right, it's as if كما قتل الناس جميعا. It is as if you have taken the life of all of mankind. So the hurma, the one thing we know is that all human blood, regardless of race, religion, creed, is sacred. And so the hurma, the sacredness of that blood, cannot be shed except for in a situation that calls for it. And we know the particulars and the conditions that are very stringent. It's not for everyone to take, and it's not for everyone to do. Even in the case, subhanAllah, where the law is the most flexible, right, in a life for a life, there must be some sort of a nafs bin nafs, which is the one that people often call for. There must be a unified, solitary form of Islamic government which can carry out this had. It's not for every individual, every Mahmoud, Imran, Jack, Joe, John, to take the law into their own hands. Right? So we understand that the hurma, regardless of where you are on the planet, who you are, where you come from, this is a hurma that must be protected.
So just wanting to highlight on the last point you made again. So even if injustice is done, we have specific people who are meant to take the law, who are meant to enforce the law. So you just being a normal person, even coming from the perspective of the deen, you don't have the right to just go and maybe this person did this. You take the law into your hands. You don't have that right.
Definitely not. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ tells us those who carry out vigilante justice in that way. There was a man. There's the qissa of the two Sahabis who were pursuing a Muslim, a munafiq, a kafir, and they caught up with him finally, and they injured him, and he was at death's door, and then he took the shahada. And even as he was taking the shahada, they cut him down, and they came to the Prophet ﷺ and they told him, Ya Rasulullah, this is what transpired. And he told them, he admonished them, that man's blood is on your hands. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, he took the shahada out of fear of death. He said, he may have, but there's no way for us to know his heart. And so we need institutions in place that act with a level of morality that can seek to carry out. We might not see them in our own lifetimes in the countries that we live in, but alhamdulillah, we can always aspire towards them. So what happens in lieu of that, there's a vacuum of authority that many people are trying to fill themselves by taking the law into their own hands. Something that we're seeing here in Minneapolis is that people are coming from neighborhoods they don't live in, out of state, out of town, and they're torching businesses that are owned by African Americans, Latinos, Somalis, simply because they're frustrated or for whatever reason. Now, when a police precinct burns down, that's a coordinated effort to strike at the heart of the police state, right? That's an effort to to really challenge the abusive authority that police maintain over the people, right? That, if depending on your politics, can be justified because the police in this country are not looking to protect or to preserve a life, rather they're looking to harm and to destroy. But when a business owned by a poor Somali woman or a Latina woman who's just selling goods at a discounted price, or a community hardware store, when those burn down, it's a very different set of political and economic realities. You understand? It would be the example if the military in Nigeria had a barracks and the military was killing people in broad daylight in the streets of any city in Nigeria, and the people protested and burned down the barracks. Now that's you taking direct action against your aggressor, people who are seeking to harm you. But if they were to go to the store or a local restaurant to burn that down, what exactly does that accomplish?
Yeah, right? A brother was telling me the same thing. A brother in New York, he said about innocent businesses. They're burning down their shops and violating their peace, and everything is just in
No, it is chaotic, and
like
subhanallah, we live in these neighborhoods. You know, we've grown up in these neighborhoods. The people that are coming to
so
do this,
now for a Muslim in such an issue, because definitely African American, be it Muslim or not, they'll be angry about this issue. Just a couple of weeks ago, Ahmed Aubrey was killed, and now Judge Floyd is killed, and we've seen during the past years a couple of other cases, and now some of the African Americans are fed up. Now, in such case, how does the Muslim react? What's expected from
the Muslim is the one whose blood is moved by injustice. The Muslim is the one who, when they see the adala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the qawa'id of the Sharia, one of the principles of the Sharia is the protection of life and limb, right? Amn al-nafs wa amn al-mal, right? You have to be able to secure your wealth and your life and your livelihood. So when the Muslim sees this, if they're comfortable at home watching from their television, and they assume this is a problem in a far-off land, regardless of where you are, this is really a plight on your iman. You should see this, Allah musta'an. You should feel that these are people that need to be looked after and protected. Right? That's the pillar of the Sharia. What are some practical steps? Not every Muslim is going to be able to protest, and not every Muslim may want to protest. But what can the Muslims who are at home do, or what can the Muslims who are unwilling to be in the street do? Support, give donations of sadaqah to those that are looking to buy supplies, to buy food. Even now, as these businesses on Lake Street in Minneapolis are burned to the ground, today what's happening is that the Muslims in Minneapolis and their allies and their friends, they're out there getting groceries, getting food, cleaning up. That's what they're doing. They're ala kulli hal, in every instance, the Muslim is one that adds value. Right? We never detract value. We never seek to destroy, to harm. We have a qaida in fiqh, la dharra wa la dirar. We never seek to harm nor to increase harm. Right? We always seek to mitigate and to reduce harm. So if you cannot protest, if you cannot be in the street, the thing you have in lieu of that is to give from your wealth in order to support those that have lost everything, because some of these businesses are not going to come back. And you can best believe that the government is in no rush, Allah musta'an, to repair or to fix what's burned down in the city. Or in any of the other cities in America today that are on fire, Louisville, Bakersfield, San Jose, California, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Newark, New Jersey. There's not going to be a big push to repair these cities once they burn to the ground.
Allah help the people who have lost properties and lives during this chaos.
For sure. So now what I'm encouraging all of us to do is to look for outlets where you can support sustainably the efforts to rebuild.
So when we talk about that's about America now, let's talk about like from a general scope of the world. The issue of justice, most times people, when we talk about justice, it's the first thought that comes to people's head is the leaders. There's or the leaders or the people who have power in their hands, and they're the ones who this ayat of justice are coming to. And so for the common man like me and you, like no one is really caring about the aspect of justice in their life, being just in this case and that case, regardless of the ayahs we've seen, where like the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, and you should judge with justice even if the person in question is closely related to you. And so here I want you to like highlight what justice is in Islam, basically coming from the perspective of a layman, like a nobody down to the up to the leaders.
Sorry, I disconnected there for a second. You were saying from the layperson all the way to the hukama?
The nobody, like from the common man.
Mm-hmm.
How can the common man implement justice to people in his neighborhood, his children? And because most times when even here in Nigeria, and I talk to some of the brothers about justice, let's discuss this topic, everything they talk about is the leaders, no, the president did this, the governor of so state did that, and so that's the concept of justice. It's all about the leaders. So if we could talk about justice amongst people who are not leaders.
So before, Allah Musta'an, something that we often see is that we demand, and we have the right to demand that our leaders, the Umara, that they act justly. Now, for them, because they have power, they're under no obligation to do so, because they can conduct themselves the way they wish, because they have the power that, for whatever reason, the people have vested in them. But beyond that, you and I, we can ensure that in our daily interactions that we ourselves are being just with each other, right? I can ensure it's almost hypocritical to demand that the leaders act with justice if the common man, you yourself and I, if I'm cheating my neighbor out of a fair deal, if I am being unjust with my own family, if I'm being someone who is seeking to spread and to cause chaos in my own life, then I'm simply a product of society, and it's unrealistic to assume that the culture or the society that I live in will then be just. So in our own, this is something that you and I can do, even as the people who run our countries, our districts, our governments, they themselves act unjust and with impunity. And we know that when the time comes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish them, and He will reward us for acting justly, should we conduct ourselves in that way. So seek, there's, and Imran, we have to finish with this because I have to run. And I wish I could have been longer, inshallah. I have to run soon, inshallah, because I have to get to the city. But remember, there was a couplet of poetry by the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran, where he was talking about how people speak about hurriya. They talk about freedom very often. And he talks about often the injustice that we're seeking to wipe away, it lives within us first and foremost sometimes. Right? Before we talk about the injustice of the world, we should seek to rid ourselves of the injustice that lives in our own hearts. How are we treating our families? How are we treating our friends? How are we treating our parents? How are we treating those that are in the immediate circles around us? Right?
Yeah. There's a saying of one of the scholars, your leaders are a reflection of what we are. Because so if the community has good people, just people, then they'll produce just leaders. And this was a saying of one of the scholars during the time of the Salafs. He made this comment. And if we check nations, like we see that really this is true in a lot of nations. Whereby you see people like here in Nigeria, a lot of times they've been complaining of corruption, the leaders are corrupt and this and that. But when you check the people during their daily lives, the way they deal with the people in the market, you see the people with the ayahs or and this injustice, a lot of things, corruption has taken over the country. So in this case, I say, if we adjust, then by the will of Allah, we'll have just leaders.
I wholeheartedly agree. We should push those that rule above us to lead with justice. And if they fail to do so, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it for us possible to seek to remove them. Right? This is something I've seen very often recently, is people saying that protest or moving against unjust rulers is haram. If that was the case, then the Salaf themselves, many of them, Imam Shafi'i, Hassan al-Basri, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, they would not have protested against the people that held them against their will. Right? So it is our duty, Allah Musta'an, to demand that these people treat us with justice and fairness. If not, we have the right to seek to remove them by whichever vehicle is appropriate in our time and place. And that looks different in Sokoto than it does from Minneapolis, than it does from Syria, than it does to Yemen, to China, wherever you may be. You have to understand your own political and economic reality. Bismillah ta'ala. My brother Amran, I appreciate you having me on, inshallah. I wish it could have been a little longer, but I do have to run back to the city, inshallah. Keep us in your du'as, keep people of Minnesota in your du'as, and the people of this country, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khair, Ustadna. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam. Oh, mashallah, tabarakallah, man. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help the brothers and the sisters and everybody